Hello World History. This is a video to support those of you who are studying El Salvador Civil War and its effect on violence and immigration today. And so you're going to have this is your document, the editorial. And today, Monday, we're researching the historic event. You'll define, write the causes, course, and effects and lessons learned from that event. And then tomorrow we'll look at the current event that's related to the past event. And then on Wednesday, you're going to share your thoughts about how the event from the past should guide our thinking about the present problem. And that you don't need to solve the current problem, but you can provide insight and reasoning using a historic example. And so today, as part of our research, the topic is El Salvador. So write El Salvador. Okay. The historic example we're going to use is the El Salvador Civil War. So if you write El Salvador Civil War right here. Okay. And what you have to the video that you have was this one. Are U.S. policies to blame for El Salvador's gang violence? Okay. And so there's some description here. This has both the El Salvador Civil War and also about the current problem too. And so I'm going to describe to you using my notes, and I'll also upload a copy of them about the El Salvador Civil War. So here you go, and I'll describe it. So you've got the El Salvador Civil War right here, causes in the background, effects of the El Salvador Civil War, and some lessons learned from it. Now, these are ones that I've come up with, and in your reading, you can find others, but this should provide you with examples to help you. So the El Salvador Civil War. A civil war is a country fighting within itself. You can think of it as like a revolution, okay? In this case, it's an unsuccessful revolution. It happened from 1979 to 1992. A long time, 13 years. And you have the one side is the government versus rebels, okay? The government versus rebels. And the government was the military, wealthy landowners, and the United States, who gave $3 billion, and also the U.S. military-trained death squads, who was part of the government. Now, who were the people fighting against the government? Peasants, different left-wing groups, that was called the FMLN, and also the Catholic Church was on the side of the peasants, as well as there was communist support. Okay, and the Civil War was there were horrible, if you look at the effects of the Civil War, horrible human rights abuses. There were part of these human rights abuses involved El Mozote massacre. You can look that up. It's extremely disturbing. And Scorched Earth campaign that was led by the United States trained death squads and U.S. weapons and funding to support this. The bishop of the Catholic Church was murdered. His name was Oscar Romero. And just this very year, he was made a saint by St. Francis. So St. Oscar Romero, he was killed during this conflict, fighting on or arguing for peace on behalf of the peasants. He was killed by the death squads who were supported by the United States. 75,000 people died. Over 1 million people were displaced, meaning lost their homes. The standard of living declined. There was more economic inequality in El Salvador by the end. And to get rid of the violence and to find more economic opportunity, hundreds of thousands of people fled to the United States during this time. Okay, and so what caused this to happen? Well, a lot of it, like most revolutions, are because of massive inequality in the system. And in this case, think about imperialism, because imperialism creates vast inequality. The United States coffee companies controlled much of the land of El Salvador. And when you think of imperialism, right, you think of the domination economically, politically, and culturally. So the United States government and U.S. companies controlled much of El Salvador, where 77% of the arable land, of the good land, belong to only 0.01% of the population. And so this massive inequality, most people did not own land, and see there's a very few people controlling the wealth of the country. And there's a military dictatorship, so the people do not have political rights either. They have no economic opportunity. And then the Civil War happens during a time of U.S. containment policy, where when the U.S. sees peasants uprising against government, they're going to think communism, right? Because remember the peasants, the sickle, and they see workers uprising. Well, they're thinking, oh, they must be communist because they're peasants and workers, as opposed to, oh, these are people who are revolting against massive inequality. And so this is both, the Civil War is a resistance to imperialism, but it's also seen through this lens of the U.S. containment policy. Okay. So, yeah, in looking through it, I went through that. There are, it's a horrible civil war causing massive death and people to flee to the United States. And this is what we're going to get into when we look at tomorrow, the current situation of immigration and violence in El Salvador. And a lot of it is caused through this civil war, which was bankrolled, and also the weapons were supplied by the United States to create even more violence within the society. During the Civil War, 85% of the murders were done on the government side, as opposed to only 5% on the left-wing side. There are clearly good guys and bad guys here. And the U.S. was on the side of the bad guys. And so, let's see. And so what are lessons learned? Violence causes more violence. The United States, as well as the El Salvadoran government and the wealthy of El Salvador, the violence that they inflicted on the peasants and the Catholic Church causes more violence. And this cycle of violence, even though the Civil War is over, it continues through the next generation. Think of the people who survived this. Their children become the gang members or of the future. And so violence is like an epidemic throughout the country. And without economic opportunity, people leave and flee to where there is opportunity in the United States. Instability in one nation causes migration. When the United States bombs a country or creates death squads in a country to kill people and keep control, it's going to cause the people of the country to seek shelter and to migrate. And just like how many people from Vietnam fled to the United States during the Vietnamese War, the U.S. support of the El Salvadoran government caused many people to flee to the United States during the Civil War and into the present. In order for a government to win a civil war, well, if the government does not, it cannot win civil wars by killing people. Throughout history, we've seen that killing leads to more killing, and that the solution has to be safety for all people, economic opportunity for all people, and political participation. And without that, you cannot have a stable government. Similarly to the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution, people need opportunity, and violence will just radicalize or make people even more violent. And so the El Salvador Civil War reflects this cycle of violence that continues today. Okay. Well, I hope that was informative, and I'll upload these notes, and you can use them as your notes to put into your Google Doc right here about the cause, the course, effects, lessons learned. And finally, this last part right here is a judgment. Was this a success or a failure that the U.S. government made? Why or why not? I think you can argue, well, I'll let you decide, but as you can see, this is largely a big failure on the U.S. government's part in providing an unjust government with weapons and training and money in order to kill people. Our government policy to contain communism actually created a humanitarian disaster, and one that we're still in need of dealing with today. All right, thank you guys. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please email me. And tomorrow we'll be looking at the present crisis and seeing how knowing about the El Salvadoran Civil War can help to give people knowledge about how to solve, or at least to think about, our current immigration and gang violence problem. And so, yeah, if you want to learn more, I suggest looking up Oscar Romero. He's a hero of mine, and an incredible story. And now he is a Catholic saint as of this year. And also the El Mozote massacre and the Scorched Earth campaign that the United States put into place in El Salvador. Absolutely horrific. And so, okay, that's it.